lived through so much technological change that it's easy to forget that at one point we didn't have cell phones. At one point we didn't use Wikipedia or YouTube or email. And that tempo has just continued to change and go on and on and on. Um, so, this has been a very dramatic period. I'm wearing a tie. I used to work in the engineering writing program, and I just share that because I've always seen myself as pro science, pro knowledge, pro technology, anti censorship, anti anything that limited our imagination or sense of what was possible. And here we are. From my point of view, we want to focus on authentic learning. And, there is a lot of inauthentic learning. I don't know what education is like for you in different environments, but I certainly sat in on a few classes in my time where I said, why am I studying this? What is the point of this? Will I ever need this? And I think our students often have those same questions now. And AI, in a bizarre way, has thrown those questions really into the forefront again. So I think we want to take a few steps back and ask, what are we doing here? What do we want to do? And I'm so pleased that this conference is being hosted by MIT ADT, because the emphasis on a holistic education seems more important to me now than ever before. And I know that's not the way a lot of people are reading the situation. Um, let, so for me, I end up taking like a skeptical, humane case for, engaging with AI, but I really want it to be a servant and not our master. And I'll discuss some things that I'm concerned about. We want to strengthen, obviously, our students' capacity, not only competence, but confidence in using the English language. We want to increase their sense of possibility and agency, what they can do with their lives as they craft the tomorrow that they've dreamed of. And I think we want to focus not only on a greater understanding of the outer world, but a little bit of our inner world. After all, some of our students are still unsure of their professional goals, some of their personal goals, and I think we are embarked in continuous self-evolution, and not only in the classrooms. I wasn't sure if I would be able to figure out how to share these slides with you. Fortunately, I was able to figure that out. But I do think we want to think, what is the goal? One of our speakers talked about learning begins with wonder, and I love that. And I think we want to, somehow keep alive the sense of curiosity. And I would suggest that a lot of the systems we have in place now and a lot of the environments we work in often, unfortunately, demotivate, make people feel like they're numbers, not individuals. And sometimes, if the teacher's not excited about the lesson, the student is unlikely to be excited about the lesson. So my question is, how do we put authentic learning first? And I think that's learning not just in a narrow sense as a worker or as a citizen or as a parent or as a creator, but in all senses of being a human being. Okay. We're going to see a couple of different Einstein quotes here. Where did I go? And let's go to the next slide. Where do I go? Okay. So bear with me. I mentioned this earlier, and I apologize for the redundancy, but the analogy just works so well for me of AI like electricity. And electricity, completely transformed the world. And it transformed the world at a different tempo in different places across the continents and within the countries. So there were parts of the United States that didn't have electricity well into the 1930s. Um, but wherever people have the opportunity for electricity, despite whatever hesitations they initially had, it was accepted and very rapidly incorporated into our lives. Now, I've got a quote here from a Japanese novelist and essayist who in 1932 wrote a wonderful book. It's called In Praise of Shadows, and it's a bizarre book. I really probably should have said bizarre rather than wonderful, but it's a fascinating book because he's a very proud uh, Japanese patriot. He's very attracted to what Japan once was in his imagination. And he is furious at the electric lights. He's furious at modern toilets. He is full of shock and dismay that his entire world has been transformed, what he sees as invasive technologies imposed from abroad. And it helped me as an American in the 21st century to understand some of the internal debate within Japan's culture. Um, about 90 years ago, um, and how it became very just fervently nationalist. Now, some of the book you read and you're like, it's 1932, and there's, just stupid racist nonsense in there. But it is useful, I think, to remember how much he distrusted and felt dislocated and displaced by these technologies that I didn't know electric lights were seen in a negative way. Why, what's wrong with electric lights? Seriously. Um, but he felt like it chased shadows away. I don't know how widespread, but it was a bestseller when it was released. And we certainly have seen a lot of Luddite movements throughout time where people feel like, hey, I might lose my job. Hey, you're ruining my quality of life. Who asked you to change my life? And when I deal with I have to admit, I face some of those. I'm an old man. I've got gray hair. Um, I would have been perfectly happy if AI did not throw itself into the world for another 5 years. Um, you know what? It could have been 10 years. It could go at a slower pace and it would be more comfortable for me. But we live in 2026 and AI is part of the environment. Um, so I do think that it's worth considering. Um, wrong direction here. And this is okay. So a couple of things. I do want to, I have to give AI some credit. Seriously. A couple of media sources just kind of recommend if you haven't had a chance to check out. The Guardian newspaper from the UK has a wonderful podcast series called The Black Box. It's from 2024, so you might say, well, Eric, it's a little outdated. It's fascinating. They have a episode 0, which has an extraordinarily articulate, lucid, even eloquent British woman describing her intense feelings of betrayal because the algorithms were changed on her AI bot, and she feels like she fell out of love. And you're like, what is going on? Um, it's a fascinating series which alternates between kind of a heaven and hell of one episode will give you a spotlight on amazing possibilities, and the next one, some very informed people, including a Nobel Prize winner who's known as the godfather of AI, warning that, well, things could go wrong. Then there's a doc that many of you have access to. I think it's now on Netflix and Amazon Prime. It's called the AI doc, and how I became an apocalyptimist. And it's a fascinating documentary where someone who is going to a documentary filmmaker and producer who has loved technology his whole life is suddenly very uneasy and finds the technological tools around him providing more anxiety than comfort. And then he does have good access to people, and he interviews a wide range of some of the leading figures in AI, and it's fascinating. In the middle of the documentary, and he's getting kind of bleak. Then I don't want to spoil too much, but he finds out that his wife is pregnant, and his wife says, "Look, this is a wonderful thing. You have to be optimistic. You have to tell me that our son is gonna have a wonderful future, and you need to find the positive here." And you need to spread the light and expand the sense of possible here. You need to do what you can. So, anyway, it's a fascinating documentary, and his conversations with some of the leading figures in AI are really worth your time. So what do we know about AI so far? Well, we know that it does amazing things in terms of as a technological tool. It can boost productivity. It can help small business managers improve their operations. It can condense long, boring faculty meetings into clear, lively summaries. Um, it helps our students and users of all ages brainstorm creative ideas. There's a former speaker at our conference um, who, Teresa Nguyen, a wonderful educator, who uses it to create bespoken poems and children's stories for her young children. And it's fantastic. And she would never have the time to create these. And her children know that they are very loved. Um, Many of us have taken trips where we've taken advantage of AI and given us detailed itineraries. And they're even more ambitious when it comes to science. You know, there is a possibility that it could dramatically accelerate the development of new pharmaceutical drugs. And many lonely people find they're able to sustain long conversations that seem natural with this other entity, this agent that feels so very real. Loneliness in America is a real problem. All of these are, to be acknowledged. They really are to be acknowledged. Um, and I am increasingly uneasy and what it means in our English language classrooms. One of the reasons I'm comfortable leaving earlier than I had originally intended from the classroom. Um, from my point of view, ELT has always had some problems in terms of a preference for safe, bland material, often a focus on standardized exams. We see more compliance language often than curiosity, and I'm a much better coach than I am referee. The way that often we have large numbers of students in our classes, and bureaucratic efficiency is often prioritized over giving more choices because we just don't have a chance to know the students as well as we would like. Um, and we all know that literacy has been a phenomenal success in the last 70 years, 100 years, around the world. Um, in order to do that, you had to have some level of standardization. You had to have some level of mass producing. We're a far cry from Socrates, excuse me, from Aristotle and Alexander the Great. We don't have that kind of one-on-one. And AI superficially promises to deliver that kind of thing. Here's my hesitation. I believe, often worsens pre-existing patterns. I'm afraid it's not changing, and I'll go into some details of how things are playing out at USC. Um, I'm afraid that there's less genuine writing, there's less genuine student growth. Um, there's a lot of very rapid creation of generic language production. I don't know who it is. And when I ask students, what does this mean? Did you write this? Where does this come from? The answers are far more often less comfortable than they were just 3 years ago or 5 years ago. And by the way, I'm lucky. I get to have personal conversations, 20, 30-minute conversations with all of my students 3, 4 times a year, semester. So that's just not the usual situation. Um, we're seeing a lot of language about, well, there's this autocorrection, and that's the same as writing, isn't it? Um, and we're having, definitions of things like plagiarism. What counts as plagiarism? That is at USC and in many other places, we're having discussions that I can't believe we're having. We're talking about co-collaboration, co-creation, and it's just a far cry from the standard definitions of plagiarism 5 years ago. And then, of course, we've always had a tendency of trying to cover an ambitious agenda very quickly, so we check a lot of boxes. Um, So it seems to me that we need to return to authentic learning, and authentic learning is something that is actually valuable to people, and it can be valuable into any number aspects of themselves. I work with adults and university students, so the challenges for an adult are different. Um, Balancing home life and earning a salary and handling many stresses are different than children, but I think that some of these challenges are very real for children. In the United States, it's not uncommon for children to be ecstatically enthusiastic about learning when they're in kindergarten and second grade, fourth grade, but by eighth grade, often not. By 10th grade, there's often a resistance. What am I doing here? Why do I need to learn this? And it's partly because the education doesn't seem to resonate with them. Um, Again, I'm afraid AI is likely, in many ways, to magnify and deepen pre-existing systems and situations. Um, what can we do? All we are English teachers with our classes. I think we have to find a humane, sane way to try to expand the sense of possible for our students and make each assignment worthy of their attention and their energy. And so I'm going to outline some tasks. I'm going to give 4 possible assignments. They're not all one size fits all at all. But the principle I'm going to try to elucidate is that student interest should come first. And we should start with a human to human interaction, and the end product should be human to human. I have no interest in students basically submitting co-authored papers with AI to a teacher that is exhausted and underpaid. And so the teacher then uses an AI tool to give feedback. And then what's going on here? Are we really going to call that education? I just can't believe it. And students are submitting AI papers so an AI system can grade them. And we do this to comply with the requirements. And then we're going to put a stamp on it. And then we're going to say, ha, educated. They got a degree here. They're certified. They got a 3 credit class. They got an A in it. I just I can't do that. I can't see that. So I think we have to ask, what can we do better? How can we, if we have to use AI, and at USC we're being heavily pressured to use AI, and our students are certainly using AI. So I think the question is, how can we use AI to really foster genuine human growth in our English language learners so they feel both more competent and confident in their expanding vocabulary and their positive experiences in the English language. Um, so I'm looking at my course curriculum. This conference began with a colleague who talked about her challenges in returning to teaching English after not having taught for a while in her writing curriculum. She looked at my curriculum and she said, Eric, man, you work too hard. I'm not doing that. So I showed a book that would be useful. 2025 had a lot of AI assignments. You could just go, there are 28 days, 28 lessons, 28 classes in our curriculum, 21 classroom sessions. Seemed like a good fit. And she did use that as a jumping off point. But as you heard in her presentation, students just used AI so much, it was so discouraging to her that she was like, okay, I've got to do something very different next semester. Um, so these are my assignments. And it begins with, having them write about their history as an English language learner and kind of doing the needs of what they want. Um, these are the assignments. One of the AI assignment is interview a dead author. I'm not a Luddite. I'm trying to include the technology in a positive way. That's how I introduce the questions of hallucinations with AI, plagiarism. How do you know what you know? Is this a real quote? Is this a quote from a novel, an interview, a journal entry? What's the context here? I see the text. First of all, is it the accurate text? What's the context and what's the subtext? And, many writers change their mind over the course of their lives. So it is not useful to know when the quote was given. We have to do professional. The course title is academic and professional purposes. I have struggled with this on the writing end. We used to find an ad, write a cover letter, do a resume, write a bio statement. As of like a year and a half ago, the bio statements, even when people are asked to write about their own lives, are, AI written, and a verb like hone, which you never saw, suddenly appears in almost every one. It's just stunning. Um, you can see the other assignments. I even have a group of assignments that are ungraded, that are just for in-class writing, low stress. Share your experiences, summarize an article, evaluate it, be fair, don't worry about it, put it up, get some feedback from a fellow human being, a classmate, go back and forth. The big project, of course, is the research paper. They have total freedom to choose the topic. Um, and I like these assignments. I like the assignments in the speaking skills class too. Again, I'm not quite sure why I need to add AI to all of these. AI is very useful for mock job interviews. It's wonderful for being able to get transcriptions of their presentations. Um, but do I want them using AI summaries? No, they never descend into details. They never actually grapple with it. Too many do not read it. And that's on me partly. And one of the answers is going to have to be have the assignments be more meaningful. I would think informational interviews where you interview a professional for in their office 20, 25 minutes and come back and tell the class that should be good. Um, what we're aiming for, I think a reasonable, stronger learner voice, greater autonomy, more humane classrooms, where we're in going back and forth in class, learning about each other, sharing knowledge that we just learned maybe last week. But when in telling the information to another person, we understand those definitions more clearly. And you know, I don't know if you've seen the movie Wall-E, but there's this, it's an animation movie and it's wonderful. But there's a great scene in there where you see someone who's, people are just really overweight and they're relaxing on a deck and they're they're just the food is brought to them and they're drinking and it's just like, wow, how passive can you be? Is this really the vision of the good life? Um, and I can't see it. Well, an institution-driven version of AI is going to focus on, giving instant feedback to students because you can do it. And it's going to lead to more and more generic essays. We're going to see, you can measure everything. And yes, the documents will be very clean and they will say very little. And it's not even ultimately say less. They just say less because the student, even if it's a restaurant review, it may not be their restaurant review, but it's what they put in, and sometimes people are just, quick. Um, I will have to share this. But let me just go against a pet peeve that we're hearing a lot of that I think is insidious. We're being told by a lot of the AI, what I almost call propagandist, that if the AI, if you brainstorm with AI and you ask it for a structure, and then it gives you a first draft, and you make a few word choice adjustments and then that you say, oh, yes, this word or that word. Oh, yeah, I prefer huge, not very large. And then you say, you reflect on your choice. It was a more sophisticated vocabulary. That co-created document is an authentic writing document. It's just not. Um, and I want us to connect with humans, not machines. I know it's kind of a lost cause. This is what I would suggest that we can do. For every assignment, let's not prioritize the role of AI. If we have to include AI, let's sandwich it and limit it and restrict it to grammar correction and maybe vocabulary and this kind of thing. But let's not outsource the actual thinking. Let's keep that. Let's honor our own experiences. So I want to start with the student either reflecting or in conversation and creating an authentic piece of knowledge, interviewing a classmate. I want them to share as much as possible with peer feedback. I have no interest in replacing peer feedback, human to human, with human to computer. I have, if you want to say, oh, yes, right now I have students ask each other questions, then they respond. If you want to throw in another loop and say add more for AI, okay, but I really don't like it. Um, and then have them give vocabulary suggestions. Okay. Yes, they should reflect on how they should be transparent. They should tell you, but they should not confuse what is basically copy and paste for their own writing. Um, and then I do want students to be able to get feedback from their classmates as much as possible. And yes, I do like having authentic ultimate audiences. So we can sometimes do that with restaurant reviews, consumer reviews. You can post it to Google Eats. You can open table, you consumer reviews on Amazon. Here's the deal. I think there's a question of cognitive autonomy and AI manipulation. And I know it's kind of a taboo topic in a lot of ways. And yes, I am incorporating AI. I am following university guidance. I am doing it. I am incorporating it where I can and find useful, but I'm not going to incorporate it just to incorporate it. But I'm also aware I have a little bit more freedom than a lot of people. But I think that it's just bizarre that we're in this situation. I'll rush through the last one. This is the five steps I suggest. Start with a personal experience. Ask them to actually reflect or either by themselves or interview a classmate or both. Have a real peer review. Then add the AI over the document after it's actually created. And then finally, yes, you're going to get reviews from the instructor. You're going to get feedback from your classmate, you're going to get feedback from the AI tool, and then you may choose to publish it to a real world audience. I apologize that I went too long, and I'm sorry about that. These are some quick assignments that I think are flexible. Ask them to talk about a photo from their home phone or a photo from their hometown, of their hometown, and follow that. But let's not start with AI. Let's start with their experience. Or they can talk about something they own, a product they own, and then, write a peer review. Or, this is what my friend Brent Warner, who had this wonderful book, Ed Tech for Multilingual Learners. It's phenomenal, jointly published by ISTE and TESOL. It's just a fantastic book. And this is one of his suggestions of have people talk about their neighborhoods and how they've changed neighborhoods and then interview and go from there. He likes creating podcasts for his classes. It's a little more creative than I am. Um, in my class, I have a lot of students who've traveled to USC from all over. They've often tend to be a little wealthy, and so they have traveled quite a bit, and that's part of their identity. I ask them to think about a travel magazine they would like to ultimately try to publish for. But in the meanwhile, let's start with their personal experience, honor their experience. Then let's have them talk about how did they feel, go through the five senses. Let's come and compare their writing. Now take a look at a few other articles about the topic, go from there. Um, just very briefly, USC has been more pro AI than most American universities. And there's some beautiful things about that. USC is a fantastic university in so many ways. Many American universities were totally flat-footed when ChatGPT came out, even though generative AI programs have been used by public relations firms and advertising firms for several years. Jasper predated ChatGPT, but somehow people were unaware of it. Um, Initially, everybody rushed to ban and say no AI. Then they said, "Oh, we're going to have these detection tools." They almost immediately withdrawn. Why? They were completely inaccurate. They did not do what they said they wanted to do. There were concerns about, bias against if there was a gap between the sophisticated topic and the developing language used. They said, "Oh, well, that looks like it's plagiarized. That looks like it's AI written." Often because it was kind of vague in general, but that is also just limited vocabulary. Inaccuracy, they would say, "Well, it's only 10% inaccurate." If you've got 30 students in a class, that's 3 students you might be falsely tagging. That's just wrong. Sorry. three students out of 100. That's one student in a class of 30. You don't want to mistreat one student of your class. Um, so then they quickly withdrew that. What are they going to do? Most universities were like, we don't know what to do. We'll leave it up to the professor. Every professor's on their own. USC was better than that. USC did embrace generative AI. It did say leave it up to the faculty, but you were heavily encouraged. You could either ban it, make sure it's on your syllabus, and then you could say, yeah, don't tell me, you can do whatever you want. But obviously, they wanted the middle choice. They spent a lot of resources on the Center for Teaching Excellence and kind of developing and making sure we all got training on that. They did want us to explicitly state the philosophy and the curriculum in our syllabus. They also, I think it was like $10 million for a seed for the Center for Generative AI, Society and Ethics. And then they hope to get $1 billion is the fundraising goal. How are you going to get $1 billion? Well, you're solving a problem for movie studios. If movies don't cost $200 million, but they only cost $5 million, that's a lot of money that studios can now reallocate. Of course, that's a lot of work, a lot of people losing work too. And that's, a whole nother element that goes beyond the English classroom. By 2026, they are now like everybody has access to ChatGPT edu for all students, all staff, all faculty. You can use any AI tool you want, but everyone has, basically professional access for the ChatGPT. Shock, people use it a lot. There was concern about whether OpenAI was using harvesting the training data. So then they promised USC, no, that we won't do that for USC. Sorry. From my point of view, we are on a strange, windy road leading, I don't know, somewhere. And I appreciate AI in many, many ways, but I am really think we need to recenter authentic learning, recenter human beings in the middle of the classroom. And I don't think we want to unintentionally encourage even more alienation, loneliness, despair, and depression among our students, all of which are very common. And that's at USC, which is a very nice, pleasant place to be in sunny Southern California. You know, it's a very strange situation. I think we have to hold on to the idea of authentic learning, and I am so impressed with MIT ADT's focus on holistic education and remembering what education should make us better human beings.